Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We're here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to the Conscious Action Podcast. This is Brian, your host, and I'm here today with a wonderful guest, Michal Garvey from Foodprint. And first of all, Michal, thank you so much for being here with us. And as I always do with all of our guests, I'm going to ask you, please introduce yourself so that all of our listeners can meet you.
Hey, awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Brian. It's an absolute pleasure to be a guest here today. I'm Michal, and I'm the founder of Foodprint, which is an app where you can rescue surplus and imperfect food to stop that from being wasted. I think for me, like sustainable sort of eating and living has been something that's been a part of my life for a really long time. And I can remember as I think I was about 16, just like my 16-year-old brain asking this really simple question of like, why on earth do people grow like crops to feed to animals and then eat the animals? Like, why don't we just cut out that middle step and just eat the crops? And I think that was sort of really like the start of my journey into sustainable food. And have been, by no means perfect throughout my life, but I stopped eating meat as a 16-year-old, primarily for the planet and the impact that food has on the planet. And so I think that there's just been a few other times across my life where food and food waste and sustainability has sort of really captured me. When I was sort of in my early 20s, I did a couple of summers working in the ski resorts in Colorado. So obviously the season changes, our New Zealand summer, the US winter over there. And I worked as a banquet server. So, doing like buffet breakfasts and events and stuff in hotels. And we just would throw out so much food off the buffets. And the rules were always, you have to have that much food on the buffet because the guests need to feel like they can eat as much as they want, sort of thing. But then once the food has been out on the buffet, like you can't do anything else with it. It's got to be thrown out. We as fairly minimum paid workers weren't even really allowed to take the food home. I definitely was never good at following that rule, but so I had a whole household to feed, so it just seemed like totally crazy to me. But my colleagues were just like, "It is what it is. It's the rules. It's like food safety." And of course, this was like America, where the threat of people being sued is just insane. So it was sort of what we did there. And then sort of immediately before I started, I was living in London and worked at HelloFresh. And HelloFresh is really great, or the sort of meal kit products are really great for sort of helping to reduce food waste in the home. But as a company, at different points of the company, like I did see food being wasted and just not really valued, which really, upset me a lot of the time. And I also, while I was there, had this really cool opportunity to work with one of the founders of HelloFresh in the UK. We ended up in a position where we had 2,500 surplus HelloFresh boxes. And myself and Patrick had to sort of work out what we were going to do with them to get rid of them, because obviously that couldn't get wasted. And we sort of set up these stands in some of the large train stations and around a whole bunch of other offices around our Shoreditch-based office, and got people to sort of buy the boxes for the price that they wanted to. and then all of the proceeds went to a London-based food charity called the Felix Project. And so I think just really like, that experience, working with the guys at the Felix Project, and understanding that we raised close to £40,000 for them in 48 hours. I didn't sleep for about 72 hours. I was like an absolute zombie by the end of it. But by giving them that money, they were going to be able to buy a new refrigerated van to help sort of service a whole other area within London, and just sort of understanding like the mass amounts of food that is wasted, and all of the reasons behind it. I think that was sort of like the tipping point for me of really like putting food waste back onto my personal agenda, and yeah, it kind of really helped lead the way into Foodprint.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that it's so interesting because like you have some realization like when you were a teenager, and then you got exposed to some of those things. Like I remember growing up, like going to, like especially in the US, anytime that we went to the US, but even in Argentina or in other places traveling, like going to like eat and going to buffets and stuff like that. And like, yes, the amount of waste. And I know like even like looking back now, just thinking about this, I remember that I would go and grab something that I didn't know if I liked or not, and
Yeah.
I would just grab and fill up the plate and then taste it. I'm like, oh, I don't like it, and just put it aside for
Yeah.
them to just throw it or whatever they were going to do. And now
Yeah.
looking back, I'm like, wow, like this is
Yeah.
incredible. And this is one of the things that I find fascinating in terms of being able to look back and to realize how like I didn't know enough, and how we can
Yeah.
change and we can learn. And the more exposure that we get to all of this, the better then that we are going to actually behave and take action. And
Yeah.
with that in mind, I would love to know, in terms of, you just mentioned that your experiences with that led you to Foodprint. What led
Yeah.
you to actually think I can do this by myself?
Yeah. I think it's kind of a funny one in a way. I have always had this sort of desire, I guess, to run my own business. I guess I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, so my dad's sort of for the majority of my life has run his own business, and so seeing him do that and work really hard to where he's got to today, and I think also seeing that, or like understanding, I guess, that I didn't really want to be working for someone else for the rest of my life. I think that's sort of part of it. And then the other part is, really wanting to work for a purpose, be passionate about what I do. I'm the kind of person that just like throws everything, at it. And so I think trying to find someone to work for that, like, and I think you probably have the same kind of feelings, like, trying to, like you spend so much of your time at work that just going to work and doing something for the sake of doing it just didn't resonate with me at all. So yeah, I think sort of a combination of a couple of things. And then in terms of the timing, like I said, I was living in London, and then I actually had a year in Sweden in between as well. And when it sort of came time, to move on from Sweden, it was like, hey, actually, this is totally the right time for me to go home and start Foodprint. And so it was, yeah, I guess kind of a combination of a few things coming together at the right time. Yeah.
And did you have this as the idea, or did you have the idea that you wanted to work with something with reducing waste, and doing this by using the power of technology, or was that something that came afterwards?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a few factors there. Like I guess like my experience at HelloFresh and there's sort of like that food tech scene there. And then, you know, I was looking at what was sort of happening in this space right across Europe. And there are other sort of similar type services throughout Europe. Yeah, so I just sort of thought, hey, this is definitely the time and place for me to do it. I think like when I was at HelloFresh, I did get really interested in the sort of tech space and trying to understand that a little bit more. And actually that's what I was doing in Sweden, was some web development study, just to give myself that sort of basis and understanding. And I think that, you know, we've got all this technology available to us, and instead of just like using it, you know, to play games of Candy Crush or whatever, like let's use it in a way that we can, you know, actually make our lives and the world better. And so
yeah, and I so resonate with that, because I have always been on the idea that technology is not good or bad. It depends on how we're using it. And the same as you just said, like I could be on Facebook, like just doing whatever and scrolling, or I could be, I don't know, like watching a TED Talk or learning, like taking a course online or whatever it is that I can do. And I think that the power of utilizing that, it's amazing, because we have perhaps a much bigger impact than if we didn't have that technology in there. And with that in terms of the impact, I'm curious if you could share a little bit more. I'm sure that you have a little bit of numbers, and how big is the waste, like the food waste issue in the world?
Yeah, so you will have to stop me because I could just sit here and like reel off facts about food waste. But some of I guess not my favorite, but you know the biggest facts to share. So globally, we waste about a third of the food that's produced. Sort of 40 to 45% of fruit and vegetables don't make it to a person's plate. 26% of the world's agricultural land is used to grow food that is wasted. I think it's about a quarter of our water use is food that is wasted. And about 8% of our global emissions come from food waste. So that's just a few. But it's, you know, it's really crazy. And when you kind of hear, I think for a lot of people, you know, that like a quarter of the agricultural land is just like wasted. I think that's when it really starts to hit home for a lot of people. And I think we just sort of don't value food, you know, like it is actually this really precious resource that, you know, it takes the soil to grow the land. To grow the food. And then just to sort of waste it, it's really just criminal. And you know, we need food to survive. And then I think on top of sort of the waste issues, and this is part that Foodprint doesn't really address, but is the you know, the fact that sort of 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 people in the world experience food insecurity or food poverty, and so that they don't have enough to eat. And so yeah, we really need to fix up our sort of supply chain around food, because what we're doing right now is extremely unsustainable for the planet. And once we sort of, you know, they're saying that we're going to have 10 billion people in 2050. Well, that's only like 30 years away. And you know, with the current amounts that we waste, we're not going to, you know, the planet is not going to be able to, you know, produce food for that many people. But actually we already produce food for that amount of people now. So yeah, but we're just throwing it away.
Yeah, and I think that, like, from the numbers that you just said, that, like, I think that a lot of people don't know even about these numbers.
No.
A lot of people don't want to know about these numbers. But
Yeah.
I think that one of the biggest things for me with all of this is that what you just mentioned, like the distribution of food,
Yeah.
which I still like. I I am like, I consider myself an earthling, like a person of the earth, and not either Argentinian, or now that I've been living in New Zealand for a few years, like a Kiwi. Like, I do consider myself like a person, as a world citizen. And I
Yeah.
think that the more that I have traveled and met people, and learned about the situation that is happening in the world, and as you said, like, people are going hungry every single day, and a lot of people dying from like malnourishment, and we actually have the food,
Yeah.
like, we are just wasting it. The other thing, as you said, is resources: water, electricity, but on top of that is the chemicals that we're
Yeah.
using, because supposedly we need to
Yeah.
like make all of this food, but actually we're wasting a third of it. So do we actually need that?
Yeah.
Like, that is such a big thing, that I think that if people knew how much we're wasting, then would we need that much to grow in that conventional sense, and not
Yeah.
organic or regenerative sense, which would be less amount perhaps.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of that waste is for just like, I mean, it's all for stupid reasons, but it becomes, fruits and vegetables that get thrown out because they're too big or too small, or they get ripe too early or too late, or, they're wonky and so-called misshapen. But like, actually, that is the shape of that fruit or vegetable item. That's how nature grew it, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the taste. But we have been trained to think that a carrot must be bright orange, long and straight, and that an apple must be perfectly round, and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, I think there's like this sort of shift in the way that we think that needs to happen almost before we can kind of start to address all these other things. And I think we've all been like guilty of it. If you think of when you're in a produce aisle or at the farmer's market and picking up the items, like you pick the items that you like the look of, right? But actually, if everything was sort of slightly misshapen and a bit more natural, then we wouldn't be looking for those perfectly round
Yeah.
apples. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you said that, because I remember a few years ago when I was living in Europe, like, I wouldn't go to the ugly, like, they had like the ugly veggies
Yeah.
thing that were discounted, and because like at that time it was mostly about saving money for me,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
those were discounted, and I was like, that's, like, as you said, like, that's carrot, like, it doesn't matter if it looks like that, or if it's whatever shape it has, like, I'm saving money and I'm buying that, cool. And then, like, I know here, like, every time that I go to a farmer's market, I if any of the growers have seconds,
Yeah.
I go and buy those, because I know that not everyone is going to buy it. And at the same time, I'm saving money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'm saving money as well, in a sense, for the grower, because most likely they are going to throw that away.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that that is one of the parts that I would love for you to talk about. What's in it, like, with everyone that uses Foodprint? You basically have like us as consumers, but also you have all of the cafes and the
Yeah.
restaurants. What's in it for them, and in that sense?
Yeah. Well, I guess first up, it's kind of like what you just said with the farmers market farmers, that they're still going to get some money for the items. So like the majority of the eateries who we work with Foodprint are actually really good at monitoring their waste and minimizing it, and they know, relative speaking, like what their how many items they're going to sell each day. But the reality is that things don't always go to plan. You never know who's going to show up, and especially recently with COVID, people are not in their regular habits and all of that kind of thing. So and I think there's also, they want to make sure that if a customer comes in 5 minutes till closing, that they're still going to actually be able to serve them some food. So it sometimes can be quite a balance of like getting that right and making sure that you've got options right up until closing, but not too many, sort of thing. So for the eateries, the fact that they've now got a channel to advertise what they've still got, it is amazing for them to sort of help get rid of some stuff rather than throwing it out. Or a lot of eateries will give food to staff and stuff, which is great, but on the flip side of that, it's still, from a purely business perspective, it is still costing them money when they're giving it to the staff. But also a lot of the time when I speak to the staff in the eateries, they're like, look, the food here is great, but like I cannot eat it anymore because I worked here for 3 years, and I know that donut is delicious, but no way do I want that anymore. So so obviously they've now sort of got this channel to make sure that as much as possible is getting sold. The food obviously through Foodprint is at a discount, but it means that the eateries are still recovering the cost of the food in a little bit more. And if you think about it in terms of hospitality, there's sort of this figure that for every $1 of profit you throw out, you need to make back sort of $3 before you've even broken even, because you've got to cover the cost of that food. And then a lot of the time, you're then having to pay for your like compost or your rubbish to get taken away. So there's sort of like, all of those additional costs. But I think the other part of the feedback that I get regularly from the eateries is that they're loving seeing customers who are coming to them who, they've never seen before, just because they might be not super close, or this customer usually just goes to the places that are between their bus stop and their office or something like that, and they're a couple of 100 meters up the other way, and they're loving seeing customers sort of coming in and really passionate about the environment and about climate change, and those are sort of the customers that the eateries want to be serving as well.
And so you just recently, like just talking about that, you recently released the bring your own container. What's why did that happen, and how has it been so far?
We launched that in conjunction with Plastic Free July this year. And to be honest, it's sort of something that I've always wanted to incorporate with Foodprint, but a huge part of why I didn't do it to start with was we were already this brand new concept of an app, that I just felt like introducing like this new concept of an app with this feature of bringing your own container might just be a lot for some people to sort of understand. And I kind of wasn't quite sure how it might go down and how it would be received and that sort of thing. So it's sort of, been something that's been on my mind right from the beginning. And of course, because the majority of the food that's sold on Foodprint is sold in that sort of to-go sort of mentality, I was always very conscious of creating, additional packaging waste through Foodprint. And in terms of the timing, obviously it was great to do it in terms of, in line with Plastic Free July. We'd just come out of the lockdown version 1, and which obviously saw like a huge upswing in single-use plastics, not just in the food industry, but so many other areas where people were just reverting back to disposable stuff, which was quite devastating to see. And so we went ahead with it, and I think the other thing we have seen as well is over the last year of Foodprint is that more and more customers were writing in the order notes, don't package up my food, I'm going to bring my own container, all of that kind of thing. So it was nice to sort of see that our customers were thinking that way as well. And it was something that a couple of the eateries had talked to me about as well, like how can we encourage this? So it all sort of came about a couple of months ago now. And we're seeing on some days it's up to a quarter of the orders are using this feature, which is amazing. It's generally sitting somewhere between about 8 and 10%, you know, and you know, that's not like a huge amount so far, but my sort of logic with it is that it's a simple checkbox above the checkout button. And if people, you know, are using the app and scroll past that button, and they might not use it on their first order, and it might not be their second order, but if it's their fourth or fifth, or even their ninth or 10th order, where they kind of look at their desk and go, oh, hey, I've got a container sitting right here, I'll check the box, then, you know, that's a win. If we can kind of create these small behavior changes, then, you know, we're winning and the planet's winning. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's so great. And the other time, I don't usually eat out. I try to like, or have takeaways. I try to like make my own food and things like that.
yeah,
But every once in a while, I do. Like I was a few weeks ago down in near the university, and I was in between different things, and I was like, okay, I have half an hour, and I need to go get something. And
yeah,
the first thing that I did was like, oh, I'll just open Foodprint and see what's there,
yeah,
because
nice,
like it was, and I had my container, so that was good as well. But
yeah,
it was just that it was like instead of going somewhere that I know that was open, I felt like, this food might get wasted. What can I actually get? And I went to Revive, which I really like,
yeah, nice.
and I was able to get some stuff. Um, I want to do a little bit of a segue from something that you mentioned before. That is that we have a lot of this food waste that happens with the growers, and then with the eateries,
Mm-hmm.
hotels, or whatever functions happen, and then we have what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
um, what is the, for those that perhaps don't know, what's the impact of all of the food that is wasted, that most of it actually ends up going to landfill?
Yeah, yeah. So, um, I guess what you're getting at there maybe is also there's a huge amount of food that gets wasted from people's homes,
Mm-hmm.
and I think especially from homes, yeah, it does tend to go to landfill, and so I think what we're really missing is this like real education piece about what actually happens when food or when anything goes to landfill. The biggest thing is it doesn't go anywhere. It's just sitting in the ground, like it's still there.
Yeah.
You know, there's that sort of mentality of there's no such thing as throwing something away. Away doesn't exist. It's still just down the road. But essentially with food, when it goes to landfill, it's left to decompose, and it doesn't get the right levels of oxygen when it's in the landfill, which means that it creates methane, which is a greenhouse gas, and it's about 30 times the has about 30 times the heat trapping capabilities of carbon dioxide. So yeah, it's warming the planet, which nobody really wants.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I guess there's, you know, there is some parts of food waste that is like unavoidable, and that's things like those that eat at the meat bones and the eggshells, and you know, I know most people don't really do much with banana peels, and truth be told, I don't. And so just making sure that those, you know, are composted or in a bokashi bin or in a worm farm, so that that they're sort of like that nutrients can then be used to go back into the soil and help regrow the next round of, you know, the next crop or whatever,
Mm.
um, is really important. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, they just don't sort of make that connection that food waste is actually a huge contributor to climate change.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's a really important part of what we're doing as well, is sort of trying to play that educational role. And we're actually just about to launch what we're calling the Foodprint Pledge. So and that is sort of asking people to commit to reducing food waste, and advocating for climate change, and working towards the sustainable development goals. And yeah, so that will be out in the next little while, which we're really excited about.
That's awesome. And yeah, I think that the education bit, it's a huge gap that we have in terms of actually enabling people to do the right thing. Because I do believe, and this is something that with conscious action, it's part of our values, is understanding that everyone is doing the best that they can. And
Yeah.
we believe that everyone is actually a nice, loving, caring person, and we just don't have a lot of the understanding. We don't have a lot of the knowledge, and if we don't have that information, then we don't know if what we're doing is wrong or not. Like if we grow up, like as you were saying before, or as I was saying, like going to a hotel or a buffet and just throwing that food away, like, and not understanding, wow, someone actually grew this. Like there's labor involved, there's water involved, there's energy involved, like there's all of this, depending on whether we eat organic or not, there's chemicals involved, and then at the end, like that's going to go to landfill, that's going to produce methane, then food transportation, like the entire chain. Like it's, if I don't understand that, then I can't make the best decisions as possible. And I actually, it's interesting because I have this thing sometimes that when I was a kid, since I was a kid, actually, I always ate a lot, like for, like, especially when I was a kid, like people thought that I had, like, the worm, because of how much I ate. But I was always kind of like, like if anybody didn't eat something, it would go to me. And I would most times finish it. And lately, in the last few years, I still do that, but I've noticed that I go to some places or meet up with some friends sometimes, and because I eat plant-based and vegan, then sometimes I'm like, there's that food there, and I don't want it to go to waste, but also like that perhaps it's meat or something, and I don't want to get it, and what do I do with that? And sometimes I get into that. Do I actually like? Do I do that? Do that one? And I think this is always for me the interesting thing about different people will have different values and will care about a different thing. But the more that we understand that for ourselves, then it's easier for us to do the right thing for us. And I do think that there is, as you said, like there's that information that is missing, especially for kids, but also for adults. Like, I mean, if kids grew up now understanding more about like how the food is grown and what is being like used in terms of resources to do that, then perhaps the relationship to it and the potential of not wasting it would actually change for them. Because I do think that younger people they are thinking differently now. Climate change is a big thing, and it's like understand that they do have the power to do something.
Definitely. I think like I sort of talk about this whole food has lost its value, and we don't like look at it like a resource, and if we looked at food like a resource, like we do, fuel or precious metals, diamonds, any of those sorts of items, like if we were known to be wasting a third of the gas that we pulled out of the ground, like people would be up in arms being like, this is crazy, what are we doing? But it's like, well, why is it okay that we do that with food? And so there's definitely a real education piece that's missing there that we're trying to work on.
Yeah, and that's great. And I always love when there's innovative ways of actually doing that, and actually like it's a win-win situation for everyone. And I think that
Yeah.
this is one of the things. It's like there's less food waste. Like when someone like you create Foodprint, like you're creating that businesses are not wasting as much and are keeping their money as well, or part of their money. There's less food waste. Consumers are able to actually get that food at a reduced price. Like
Yeah.
there's for like almost every like space that I look at it, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Of course, like as I said before, like you can't focus on everything. Like, and inside of the food waste, like there is already the food that is wasted even before it gets out of the farm. So like I know that there's others that are doing that, or how the food is being redistributed or things like that. But
Yep.
I think that the power of focusing on something and then being able to work alongside others that are doing something similar is how I believe that we are going to actually create change. And in light of that, have you been able to find and collaborate with others that are more or less in the same space, that are doing slightly different things than you?
A little bit. Like I've definitely had conversations with, you know, like the likes of Kiwi Harvest and Everybody Eats and that kind of thing. When New Zealand first went into lockdown, we made some changes on our platform so that Everybody Eats could be selling their meals through Foodprint as well. But I think the sort of difference is, you know, with what Foodprint is doing, we don't quite fit into having like that collaboration in the long term with many of them. But I think that, you know, having those conversations is super valuable. It's sort of important to make sure that like we're sort of I guess addressing slightly different parts of the food waste chain as well. You know, New Zealand is quite small, so it's nice to make sure that we're all sort of complementing each other in terms of what we're doing, which is really cool too.
Yeah, cool. And at the moment, unless I'm incorrect, you're in Auckland.
Yeah.
Are there plans for expanding, and how's that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think unfortunately, like many others around the world, plans have just been put on hold due to COVID. You know, and especially like now with Auckland and our second lockdown, and we're just really focused on helping support the businesses that we're already working with, and just doing everything we can for them. I think that sort of trying to launch a new service in another city when there is so much uncertainty is a real challenge. So yeah, just sort of waiting it out for a little bit more at the moment, and we have made a couple of changes to our platform. You know, when we went to level, well, actually we did it in the middle of March, when I could sort of see what was happening, when, you know, people were being told to work from home if they could. Before we even had our alert level system, we implemented the option for eateries to use Foodprint for all online ordering. And so that's been, I guess, a nice thing to sort of play with. We did remove it, and it's now back again, given that we're at level 3, and that sort of contactless option is really valuable for the eateries. So yeah, I'm sort of now in a position of trying to figure out if, you know, if we move back to level 2, we remove it again, or if we kind of keep it. It's an interesting space to be in, and just one of the many things that are running through my mind on a daily basis at the moment, but that's all part of it. So
yeah, definitely. And speaking of COVID and all of these times, like, because you are in contact with eaters and things like that, what has been your sense of, like, I know a lot of places, especially restaurants and cafes, this hit them, hospitality, this hit them a lot.
yeah.
What has been your experience with that, since you're working with them directly?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said. It's been hard. It's been real tough. You know, hospitality. obviously couldn't function at all under level 4. Level 3 is really hard for a lot of eateries. We had kind of primarily been so focused on eateries in the central city of Auckland. Obviously there's so many of them, and that's generally where all the people are. And now with the move to level 3, there's a lot of the eateries we work with just aren't open at the moment. So I know that that's really hard for them. There's also like a lot more pressures on the staff trying to sort of navigate the systems as well, which I know is really challenging. And for many of them, when they can't offer, their normal dine-in options as well, it's a lot harder to sort of break even for the day and that kind of thing. So sometimes it can end up costing them a bit more, to cover their staff and stuff. But so it's a really fine line for a lot of them, I think, and a lot of them have made some tough decisions to stay closed at level 3, level 2, and I think it really depends for the individual eateries on what they've done. But I think the one bit of feedback that I've had a number of times that's consistent sort of across the board is that hospitality's just become really, really inconsistent. So, beforehand, they would know, what they do on a day. Their average day would be pretty consistent. Whereas now, like if they're in sort of one of the large commercial buildings in the city, and that several floors of that building decide that they're not going to be in the office on Wednesdays anymore, then that just destroys a Wednesday for that eatery. So just that sort of inconsistency. No one sort of seems to be back into their groove yet. But I think also the other thing that's been amazing feedback is the flip side of that, and the fact that the New Zealand public has really put in everything they can to kind of support, where they can. But I think that, for a lot of people, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of people have lost jobs and are in positions of being uncertain about their jobs. So whilst often they're still able to support, maybe the level of support is reduced a little bit. But I know that it's all really appreciated from the eateries that we work with. So
and I mean, as you say, like uncertain times, uncertain planning.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hard things of as well, like as you were saying, for yourself and for others, like what's the plan? Like I know for myself, like I don't know what's the plan for the next few weeks, because I don't know if we're going to open up or not. Am I going to be able to actually run events or not? And it's hard for the planning, and I think that it's a challenging time for a lot of people to be able to go through this. And I just, like, it crosses my mind, and I don't know if you know enough about this, but do you know if there's anyone in the farms that are actually working with something similar to Foodprint in terms of being able to actually, all of the ugly or misshapen fruits and veggies, is there someone that actually is selling that?
There is, as far as I'm aware, it's still relatively small as sort of ugly fruits, and I can't remember ugly reject sort of fruits and vegetables. I think a lot of stuff otherwise gets distributed like through the likes of Kiwi Harvest and Kibosh and organizations like that. And they tend to, want to work with food sort of en masse. They are working with big groups and where there's, really heavy need. And so rather than sort of focusing on the hospitality eatery sort of scene that we focus on, they go for that sort of higher volume stuff. obviously Eat My Lunch, they take like a lot of donations and stuff like that. But yeah, in terms of sort of a marketplace for that surplus stuff, there isn't anything that I'm aware of. It's definitely a space that I've considered as well for, for really far down the line. But yeah, obviously we're just a little 1-year-old company at the moment. So
Yeah,
yeah.
but I think that it's great, and I think that it is great to be able to see more and more initiatives that actually are creating change and are able to actually do something that is positive. So yeah, that's an amazing thing. And with saying this, and because I know that we could be talking for hours and hours, I'm just going
Yeah.
to ask you a few final questions. And the first question that I wanted to ask you is, what's one resource that you would recommend to others?
I was thinking about this one, and I think that the most important thing, instead of sort of recommending one resource, which is the question, but I think the really important thing is finding a resource that suits you. So, like I love listening to podcasts. So, obviously listen to this one, and there's loads of other podcasts out there, and loads of New Zealand specific ones. Listen to TED Talks. That sort of thing. If you want to get like really in depth with reading, like I love getting into the UN Food and Agriculture Organization website, which is just like this treasure trove of information. And then one of the other things which is really great is like that Zero Waste in New Zealand Facebook group, which I kind of hate that I'm recommending Facebook, but I think what's amazing with that group is it's really accessible, and there is just so many topics covered on there. So you can go in and do a little search and just find out all of the research that other people have done for you, which is great. And I love that it's, like I said, accessible for people. Yeah,
and I actually like, it's interesting because in a few episodes ago I talked with Waveney Worth, that she was talking about how hard it was for her like to start living plastic free and zero waste back when there weren't that many resources, and now that there's pages on Facebook or not on Facebook that people are sharing their knowledge and what they have done and different ways of doing things. That's so helpful for all of us that are trying to learn things at this moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think like that connection with other people that are on the same journey as you, and they might not be at the same point in the journey, but they're either a little bit behind you or a little bit ahead, and just sort of feeling that level of connection is super important. And I've listened to Waveney speak, and it sounds like it was a lot harder in her day back like definitely. 10 years ago or whatever it was. Yeah,
definitely. What is like one of your top tips that you could share with people?
So I think first up is just being aware of your consumption and of your impact, or in the impact that your consumption has, because I think obviously if you're not aware of that impact, then you can't make changes. So stopping and asking yourself, do I really need to buy this item? What am I going to use it for? Can I use something I already have, or can I buy it secondhand, and that sort of thing. And I think that sort of mindset has really, really helped me just reduce what I own and what I consume. And by no means perfect, and there'll be times when I'm like in a rush and I'll just be like, oh, I need this, run in and grab it, and that's, for me, that's when I make poor decisions about around my consumption and that kind of thing. But I think in terms of like food and eatery kind of things as well, it's like always carry your keep cup and always leave a container at your desk or in your car or your handbag or wherever, so that you've got those things on hand, is like just a really easy behavior change that you can make as well. So
Yeah,
going for two.
and I love as well that I'm seeing more and more, for those that perhaps don't remember to do that, seeing more initiatives like again with reusable cups that like I don't even need to bring one if I forgot, but it's like more and more eateries and cafes and restaurants moving towards that reusable side. That's a really
cool.
good thing as well.
Yeah, there's some guys in Wellington have just launched Reuse a Bowl as well, which is like the same kind of vibe, and some really cool bowls. So yeah, I look forward to seeing that one grow and doing something with them when they come to Auckland for sure.
Nice, beautiful.
Yeah.
What has been your latest small act of kindness?
Oh, this one's hard because I think, I don't know, like I generally think of myself as a pretty like kind and giving person. So trying to kind of like that's just part of my normal life. So sort of trying to input it. I guess one thing that I did just this last weekend was I've been doing some political campaigning with the Greens and with Chloe Swarbrick, and obviously right now that we're in lockdown, we're not able to do any in-person campaigning and stuff like that. But I've been involved with helping get her postcard campaign off the ground for this election. And over the weekend, even though we were at level 3, I went out and did some contactless delivery so that I could make sure that people were still able to feel like they were doing something for the campaign over this 2-week period. So yeah, I guess I'm going with that as my random act of kindness.
Nice. That's a good one. That's a pretty good one. The last question is, what's the one thing that you wish that the world or everybody knew?
Yeah, I think it was probably going to sound quite cliche, but that vibe of we actually all can make a difference. And, you know, I think lots of people sit around and wait for like government change and, you know, all of these regulations and all of this, but actually we don't need that. And our actions, you know, our individual actions really do matter. And we have this voice, and the collective voice can really drive change. And I think, you know, for example, like the plastic bag situation in New Zealand is a really good example of this, in the sense that, you know, you and I, Brian, had already banned plastic bags long before the plastic bag ban came into force. You know, so we wouldn't have been using them for many years. And so, you know, I think that if we're all just sort of continuously moving, so we've got that one out of the way, and, you know, like now what's next? And I know that things like straws and cotton buds and, you know, plastic cutlery and all of that kind of thing is sort of coming up next. But that's just a result of this collective voice and the actions that have come out. So yeah, I think just really that vibe of not waiting and just taking our own actions, because it really does make a difference. And on top of that, we kind of obviously touched on this, but I really wish that people understood the connection between food waste and climate change, and how, you know, if we got food waste under control, our planet would be a much healthier place. So,
True, very, very important things. And saying that, where can people find you, and like what can people do?
So I would love for people to follow Foodprint on Instagram or Facebook. So it's just Foodprint NZ on both platforms. Obviously you can download the app and rescue some food, and I think you can probably attest to it as well. Like, the food tastes really good, and you kind of get this really good feeling out of it too, because you know that you've rescued that food. And then I mean, I'm pretty accessible through my personal Instagram, or, you know, sending a message through the app that comes to me. So if people want to connect with me, I'm really happy to connect with them too.
Beautiful. And will put the links on the notes of the podcast episode so that people can go there directly. But thank you so much, Michael, for taking the time and for sharing with all of us what you're doing and what Foodprint is doing to actually help reducing food waste and to help with this huge issue of climate change.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everyone that has been listening to this episode. If you have anything that you want to share, anything that you learned from this episode, please share it in the comments, and we will see you at the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.